Welcome to the Second Line Show. I'm Nola Nash. Let's let the good times roll. Welcome once again to the Second Line Show. I am your host, Nola Nash. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our All Things Irish special. As we get ready for St. Patrick's Day next week, we will not have a live episode of the Second Line Show next week because I will be in New Orleans. And so you guys know how I feel about New Orleans. And I could be anywhere. I could be in the French Quarter. I might be feeding alligators in Barataria Swamp that night. I really don't know. So we are going to just take St. Patrick's night off and let you guys celebrate with your green beer and everything that you want to do that night. But thank you for joining us tonight for our Irish special. And as you guys know, we will take your comments and questions as much as we can. So go ahead and drop those in the comment section wherever you are watching us live, whether it is on my page, Annie McDonald's page, The Right Review, Nola's Second Line, or live on YouTube. Put those comments in those sections. If we don't get to it tonight during the show, we will go check back in with those comments and answer what we can. If you're watching as a replay, please put your comments there too, because they will send me a notification and I'll check back in and make sure that I've answered any questions that you have, or we can tag the authors that are on the show. That'll send them a notification too, so that they can answer your questions. All right, so without further ado, we are going to go ahead. Let me get back over here to where I need to be to do all of these things that I need to do. Let's go ahead and introduce you to our authors tonight. So we always go Brady Bunch style. So we're going to start over here with Kevin Lee Akers. So
I'm Bobby Brady.
Go ahead and let's tell the people a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you write. You've got a book coming out, so make sure that you tell them all about that as well.
Yeah, I do. I'm actually a graphic designer, but I've written books on design before, so I thought, well, I'll try to do a novel. And it's a saga about a family coming from the Midlands of Ireland, which nobody really writes about much because it's sort of the South Dakota of Ireland. It's right in the middle, great land to farm on. So this family is kind of goes through the whole stages of endurance, of trying to get through famine and get through some of the political changes. And they come out eventually to San Francisco, where they come in 1849, which was a nice year in San Francisco to be there, and kind of all the trials and tribulations that the family has. So it's called The Duns of Britis, an Irish family saga of endurance, and it comes out on St. Patrick's Day.
Awesome. So exciting. Gotta love a book launch on St. Patrick's Day. That is always fun. We've got lots of folks joining us tonight. We've got Holly Ward is here. Holly is here. We have got folks joining us from all over the place. So hello from Dallas. Holly's over here. What does Holly want to say? Oh, few good books to read. We've got some for you. Absolutely. Oh, and Erica's looking forward to our St. Patrick's Day special on Sunday. The St. Patrick's Day parade is going to be huge. I'll give you a little bit more information about that here at the end of the show, but make sure that you are starting to clear some space on your calendar for Sunday, because that's going to be a party, y'all, and all day long. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Thanks, Erica, for bringing that up. We are going to pass that information on to you just a little bit later. All right, Patricia, introduce yourself to the people, my dear.
Oh, well, hello, I'm Patricia Falvey. I was born and raised in County Down, Northern Ireland. My father was from County Mayo. I now live in Dallas, Texas. Don't ask why, it's a long story. And I, 10 years ago, switched from having a career in the financial service industry to becoming a full-time writer, which is what I always felt as an Irish woman I should be doing anyway. In those past 10 years, I have now published 4 novels. The Yellow House came out in 2010, The Linen Queen a couple of years later, 2 years ago, The Girls of Ennismore, and just last month, my latest book, The Titanic Sisters, which follows the story of 2 sisters from County Donegal in Ireland, and who go to America via the Titanic. Obviously, that's part of the title, and whose adventures take them ultimately to Texas. So it's kind of a fun book, a fun ride. Well, it wasn't on the Titanic, but it has been
except for that one little detail.
Been a fun ride. And so anyway, so 4 books and hoping for some more eventually, all of them Irish themed.
Wonderful. Awesome. The Titanic sisters, y'all, you got to get that one too. They're all great. Just, we are going to add to your TBR list, and I'm sorry, but you're going to have to read real fast to get them all read before St. Patrick's Day, because you're going to want to read them all. I assure you, you will. All right, continuing in our Brady Bunch circle here, we're coming down to Joe Palmer. We're going to make a big loop is what we're going to do. All right, so Joe, please tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Hi. I've been writing in some form or fashion since I was like 17 years old and fell in love with my high school creative writing teacher. So she came to me one day and said, hey, you should write. You have a gift. And so that sort of started it. A Mariner's Tale is my first novel. And I got the idea for it actually while working on an old sailboat that my wife and I rehabilitated. And I knew fairly early on in the story that I wanted it to end in Ireland. And I'm not going to get into spoilers or anything. So I took another trip back over there 3 years ago, and I spent a week in Dublin and Dunleary down on the coast doing the research and meeting people and sort of getting the background together. The story is about the cynical old mariner who basically rescues this troubled delinquent kid and makes a man out of him. And so anyway, that's what I wanted to do. And so when I got done writing it, I didn't want it to come across as inauthentic or anything. So I surrendered that last chapter to all of my Irish reading friends and just said, have a go at it. Make sure it's right. And I was very pleased with the end result. And so that's where we are. It's A Mariner's Tale, and it was published by Kohler Books on October the 25th.
Now, Joe's got the right drink back there, too. Joe, tell them what you're drinking tonight.
Well, actually, I'm a teetotaler, so.
What you pretending to drink tonight, Joe?
I pretended to drink Jameson. I had to leave off the Irish stuff a few years ago. I keep it here for my friends, and every time I uncork it for somebody to have a drink, I always sniff the cork before I put it back in. So, just for old time's sake.
I love it. I love it. Well, you got to at least have the prop back there. I got to say, I do not have an Irish one. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, this is green tea.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, cheers to you, Joe, and your green tea and your lovely Jameson prop.
Thank you.
All right, we're coming over.
That's the Catholic whiskey. That's what you got to drink, you know.
That's right. You got to drink the Jameson, right? All right. Oh, Annie's here. Annie says that Kevin, she loves your jacket. And Tim was noticing the Jameson in the background as well. So we had to mention it. All right. So, Heidi, we are coming down to you. I had Heidi and Annie in my mouth at the same time, and it came out something weird. So disregard that. Heidi, we're coming down to you.
No, well, thank you very much for inviting me. This is very exciting for me. I'm Irish. My mom's from Ireland, makes me an automatic citizen, which is kind of cool. And we were on one of our trips back home across the pond, as they say. And we were at a 50th Jubilee for a family friend and none that we know. And during this event, I had heard mention of an industrial school, and it captured my attention. And they were facilities that housed orphan, illegitimate, and destitute children. And I couldn't let go of it. And once I came back home, I started to investigate it a little more. And I actually was able to make contact with 5 former residents of the same facility, and it was in Ballinasloe. And they consented to telling me their stories as long as I didn't reveal who they were. They carry a lot of shame at that time over a situation like this. And I went back to Ireland a couple of times. I traced their steps. I went back. I talked to the nuns. I went to the facility. And the final outcome was a novel called The House Children. And it's based on the story of one of the girls in particular, the one I could find the most documents on, because I tried to make it as accurate as possible. I had the great pleasure last January of returning to Ireland and speaking about my research in Ballinasloe in the library. And the library was the former convent that I originally wrote about. So I feel like I came full circle with the book. And I love being Irish. I love their history. I mean, it's a hard history, but it made these people who they are, and it's in my genes. Love it.
That's awesome. What a story. I'm so glad that you told the story about how you found this, because when I was reading about the book, that was my question too, is how do you find this particular thing and then the stories that go with it? And so I'm very glad that you shared that, because I was definitely interested in that. All right, and Claire down here, Claire is joining Annie and I for our big Irish festival.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much, Nola and Annie McDonough. You know I love you. I recently did my Ancestry.com, although I already knew what I was. 48% Irish, 45% Scottish. And so, yes, I have it on both sides. And I've always been incredibly drawn to Ireland. And I'm the author of 4 novels. My last 2 are set in the Deep South where I grew up. But the first novel I wrote was my second novel published. And it's this, Dancing to an Irish Reel. And I can say that I've been a full-time author since 2013, when my first book came out, and the same publisher published Dancing to an Irish Reel 2 years later. And I wrote the book because at the time I had just come back from spending about a year and a half living in Galway, Ireland, and in Connemara. I lived in Connemara and I worked in Galway, and I kept journals while I was there. And when I got back to America, I said, you know, if there's not a story in this, whatever. But my intention was to write about Ireland as I experienced it, you know, living in a small village for that length of time. And I wanted to tell the story of really the Irish as I found them, which is incredibly lovely, salt of the earth, heart and soul people. And I can say that just their capacity to enjoy the present moment and their sense of humor and all of that, that's what I wanted to capture in Dancing to an Irish Reel. An American outsider moves into a small village in rural Ireland. And so that's my contribution to this evening's festivities, and I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we are happy to have you. We're happy to have all of you kind of kicking off our St. Patrick's Day festivities. I guess we're kind of making a week of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, yes, Jeff.
I forgot to add the most important part. I'm Irish by way of County Wexford and Tipperary.
Awesome. Very cool. I have Irish descent as well. There's so much Irish in our family. We've been doing our DNA as well. And so we're about, my daughter hers has come in. Mine has not come in yet. She is 89% Ireland, like UK, Great Britain and Ireland. So heavy on the Irish side. So and she's only one side of it. So I know I've got it on both sides. I've got Shannons and Dormans and Bogans and all these lovely names in my background. So my grandmother was a Shannon. So Shannons and Dormans. So we've got lots of Irish in our background as well. Proud to have it there. I always say that's where the green eyes come from. It's got to be the Irish in me that gave me those. But I always love going back to, I haven't actually been to Ireland yet. I hope one day to go. It's definitely on my list. My aunt would always send me like these Irish castles you could buy. And I'm going, why are you sending me this? This is mean. Like, I can't go do that. But I really want to go. So I'm living vicariously through all of you who have been and all of your great adventures. And I would really, really, really love to experience that firsthand. And I think one of the things that draws me there is that real life kind of small village thing. You know, I know that Dublin is a very exciting place to be, but I love just the villages and that small town feel and their everyday life. Like you said, their kind of joy for the present moment and making the most of that, celebrating the small things, and just kind of getting down and dirty with the real people of Ireland. I think if I went, my plan, and you'd have to give me some advice, those of you who've gone, when I do plan this trip, one day when we can leave our houses and can go over there, I'll have to definitely get all of your advice. But I would love to stay more in the countryside, you know, find those bed and breakfasts, those little inns that you can stay in, spend some time in Dublin, get to know the big cities, because there's so much just art and culture and wonderful things there. But it's the people who draw me over there. And I love that you all have captured the people in your books, you know, the heart of the country that it does so much to inspire imagination. I mean, we have so many great stories and everything from legend to superstition that comes out of Ireland, but it's so woven into the very souls of the people there. And as authors, what a great thing to be able to capture in your books. And so I guess my opening question to you, we've got lots of people with their Irish background. Yes. All the Irish turning up here tonight. Slide up, Irish people. Come on. But we've got all of these great aspects of this country and things that you know so well about it. How do you decide which particular elements you want to bring in, and you know which part of this very, very rich tapestry of a country do you focus your book on, you know, when you sit down to write a book? And now I know some of you have several that have, you know, Ireland in it, and maybe you've attacked it different ways for different stories. But you know, what is it that you decided to bring to it, and why did you choose that particular element? Anybody just jump in. We are just family here. We're sitting around. We're having drinks. Y'all don't need to wait on ceremony. Go ahead. Tell us anything you got.
I started with my book. I'm supposed to, you know, I had one editor tell me, if you're writing about your family, nobody cares. So don't write about your family because everybody has one. So this isn't about my family. It has nothing to do with the family. I went and researched the family, and it came out that the story is exactly like the family. So I don't know how that's going. There's always a section that I'm trying to explore where there's the downtrodden Irish and the peasants and the people that really suffered. And then there's the ascendancy Irish to the English influence, the ones that had all the money. So in my book, I have two different sides of, there's a manor house called Britus, and in the manor house, this general lives who is purely Irish, but he's married into the ascendancy. And then his cousin, second cousin, is the estate agent, and his family is more middle class. And then the villagers and the cottagers are the lower class. So I try to explore those three different levels of people and try to not take a point of view as to one over the other, because they each, in the back of me, there is General Dunn that I painted. He's the kind of patriarch of the family. So he has a lot of stuff on his plate. He's got a lot of people to worry about that are on his estate. He's got the army breathing down his back. He's got his family that's being torn apart. And, you know, he has his concerns. He's going to have enough food to eat, but he still has worries and his own set of circumstances versus some of the cottagers that are living hand to mouth and depending on their potatoes in the backyard and what happens to them. So it really is, you know, tend to write about like the lower classes of Irish, and they did so much for our country because it's sort of booted out of Ireland, and they came to our country and flourished and made America what it is. But in the meantime, there were a few other societal sections that I tried to explore just to give it a little bit more facet to the story.
I love it. Go ahead, Patricia.
Well, obviously I was born there, and I was raised by my grandmother in Ireland, and through no fault of my own was taken away from there and moved to England when I was 9 years old. And Ireland has always stuck with me. It's in my heart. It's in my soul. And when I first started writing, the book that came to mind, The Yellow House, was the story of my grandmother. And I had been raised with her as a young child. And her story, she lived through the the Irish uprising and the ultimate partition of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. And what I do like to do, I love history, and I try to pair the story that I'm writing with some actual historical event in Ireland. But I also find myself telling the stories through the stories of my relatives, the people that I came from. And for the most part, for some odd reason, they all tend to be women that have influenced me. But there's something about that. There's many ways in to the stories of Ireland, as you indicated, because they have so many stories. But for me, it's about the history, how the history has shaped the people, how in many ways the people have shaped the history, and their characters have been shaped by the history and by what they have had to fight through. And also certain things that are maybe a little bit more on the feminist side, like my first couple of books centered, among other things, on the linen mills in the north of Ireland, which is where many of the Catholic poor women, it was the one place they could get jobs. And oddly enough, they were owned by Quakers, which, you know, when doing the history, that's
Think about them there.
historical fiction, that you learn so much more than you thought you knew about the history of the place. And my third book, The Girls of Ennismore, was actually set in County Mayo. So speaking of a small village and how the people in the village were all aware of the big manor house, and they all worked up there. And several of my cousins who lived on a farm very close to this place that I called Ennismore, it's actually called Ennisgo in County Mayo. They had all gone to work up at the big house, as they called it. And so that was something I wanted to explore. And I guess at the end of it, I'm thinking, had I been there during those times, which I could have been, you know, skipping a generation here and there, what was it really like? And I wanted to pay homage to them. And I think, and that was without setting down with a plan. It was just what came into my heart. So I think that's how the Irish have a wonderful sense of mysticism and beyond sort of reality. You know, it's like they accept anything, ghosts, you know, all these old mythical stories. And so, you know, you just take for granted whatever comes into your head, that's what they want you to write about. And hopefully that's what I've done so far.
And I love that you've chosen different time periods too. You've got World War I, World War II, the Easter Rebellion, and the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love that you've not just kind of centered in on, you know, one necessarily generation of those people. There are so many stories and so many different time periods.
So
and what a great way to
breathing down your neck when you're writing and like almost saying, no, don't write that. What are you doing?
Well, you know, you're right. My grandmother was over my shoulder when I was writing her story to make sure that I had it right. I mean, she was there. I've told people this, and, you know, they walk away when I say these things, but it's true.
I believe
she was there, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I believe that. I believe that 100%. And she's definitely, I mean, if she's an Irish grandmother, she's making sure that the story is the story she wants told.
And she made sure the book was dedicated to her, too. It wasn't that she had the dedication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What about the rest of you guys? I love this. This is great.
So I decided, because my character is an old mariner, he was a career merchant marine. And as he tells this boy that he's rearing, all these wonderful stories about all the places he's been, to Amsterdam and Corfu and Hong Kong. But his favorite place of all was Dublin. And it's a place that just sang to him. It just called out to him. And so when this boy is older and learns how to be the master mariner that he is, he decides to, as a hat tip to his father now, to return, to go there himself. And of course, I wanted a particular seaport in mind. There's a beautiful little town out on the coast called Dunleary. out from Dublin and down about a 20-minute train ride south from O'Connell Station. And it's got the prettiest harbor I'm an ex-Navy guy, so I've seen some beautiful harbors. The harbor at Dunleary absolutely melted my heart when I saw it. It's got these two arms that reach out into Dublin Bay on either side. They're made of granite and stone. And so all the people, it's a promenade, you know, people walk and old guys go out there and sit and smoke their pipes and lovers walk back and forth. And I just really wanted to see that place. And I wanted to see the marina there because part of the story does take place in the marina. But I also wanted to see a regular neighborhood. I needed to go to Dublin because of a pub. And I actually used 3 pubs in Dublin. One was O'Neill's and the other one was called the Hairy Lemon. It's 2 pubs. It's sort of.
Great pub names.
Yeah, there was another one, I forget the name of it, but mainly O'Neill's and the Hairy Lemon was the model for the pub. Eamon Nolan's pub in my story. But while I was there, I had in mind a particular kind of neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. I wanted to see where this old Irish lady in the story, her name is Emma O'Toole, and she comes from Means. You know, her family is fairly well-to-do. And so I had met this busker when I was in Ireland the last time. And so he was playing at Mass at St. Teresa's, I think it was. So he said, meet up with me, he and his wife, Anastasia, and they were going to take me out and show me around. And so after we had breakfast, he said, well, what do you got in mind? I said, I have this picture in my mind of this neighborhood. I don't even know where it would be, but this is what I'm looking for. And he and his wife looked at each other and he goes, I know exactly where we need to go. They took me to this little village called Terranure Village. And Terranure in the old tongue means land of the yew trees. And this neighborhood is just adorned with these beautiful old yew trees. And this beautiful old Catholic church, St. Joseph's, whose stained glass windows were designed by this famous stained glass window designer named Harry Clark. I recently discovered that in the Episcopal Church here where I live, one of those windows was a Clark window. And the reason I noticed that was because he used a particular color blue in every single window he designed. And so I'm looking at this window one morning and I'm thinking, that's a Harry Clark window. And I got to looking and sure enough it was. So that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see the coast. I needed to look for some downtown stuff for the pub scenes. But I really wanted to see this little neighborhood where this old lady could live. And it was these old brick Victorian mansions with the slate roofs and the yards full of shrubbery with birds singing in them. And so that's what I did. And that's what I ended up with. But yes, it's just beautiful there. And I asked a friend of mine while I was there, how is it that some American guy with Irish roots can feel so drawn to this place? And he looked at me as if I were stupid and said, it's tribal, mate.
I love that. It's fantastic.
It's tribal.
It's tribal. I'm sorry. It's just that's who you are. The strings may be invisible, but there is still the ties that bind. I mean, you have to find your way back home eventually. I love that. What a great story. Now, you said that it was a busker who you had met on a previous trip. And before the show, we were talking about the fact that chatting with the buskers in the city is something that you enjoy doing.
I do.
And that's how you make new friends there.
I
love it.
Because I will talk to a post. You know, my wife teases me all the time. We can't go to public and get out in less than 2 hours because it's a social visit. But no, I'll tell you who I also met, and you may recognize her name. I went around the corner. I came out of O'Neill's. I was having supper at O'Neill's pub, and I came out of the pub, and I heard this young girl singing with this very high, sweet, trilling voice, and she sounded at times like Dolores O'Riordan, the former Cranberry lead singer, who I just loved her music. Anyway, so I followed my ear around the corner, and there was a teeny tiny little girl, all of about 4'2". Her name was Allie Sherlock. Allie was playing she was playing a song called "I'll Fix You." She did. It was a cover song. It was better than the original artist, in my opinion. And I listened to her play, and her dad was standing there waiting for her to get done. And I told her after she got done, I said, "Young lady, you need an agent. You'll be famous one day." She is. She's been on the Ellen DeGeneres show. I think she's been on Oprah. Everybody in Ireland now knows who Allie Sherlock is. And I'm a member of her fan club.
All right.
You had a missed opportunity there. You should have been a talent scout. This is your side gig. From here on out, you just need to go be talent scouts in Ireland. That's your job now. Think about what you just missed out on. You could have been her representation. Come on.
I want to send her a book, but I can't figure out how to get in touch with her.
I bet you can. Maybe.
I make mention of that last chapter of a little Irish singer on the street, and that's who I had in mind when I mentioned it.
That is super sweet. And I bet one day the stars will align and you will get that book to her exactly the way you're supposed to. Quite sure of that. I'm quite sure of it. Claire, Heidi, what about you guys? How do you decide? I mean, Claire, we know you pulled from your own experiences there, which is fantastic because so many of us are that outsider. You know, if we were to go, except for Patricia, I guess you are Irish.
It's
you live there.
That Joe touched on that, and that Irish traditional music. Keep in mind that it's not really written down; it's passed down in families. And as I was in Connemara, in a small town called Invern, which is part of the Gaeltacht, which is the Gaeltacht meaning where they speak Irish as a first language, and it's on the other side of Spittle. Spittle is like the most notable town. But the irony, and this is a true story, and I believe in all things unseen, and I believe ancestral memory. That's what Joe was on about just now. Ancestral memory. Of course it is. That we inherit proclivities from our forebears, talents, green eyes, in my case, whatever. But doesn't it seem fit that we also, therefore, would inherit some of their memories, especially if things are hard-hitting, not necessarily trauma, but maybe loves and again talent. And so there's a pub called the Lachine. It's famous for its Irish traditional music in Galway. And I went in there in truth with the young people I was working with at the Galway Music Center. And while they went to the bar, I went to the big room and I saw a guy on stage. And in my life, I have never been so haunted by the look of a human being. I'm saying before or since. And dark eyes, dark hair, black Irish, as they say, beautiful, poetic looking. In the way that William Butler Yeats is a beautiful man. He's a feminine looking, beautiful man. And I love that, and so I was like looking at him like I had seen a ghost. 3.5 weeks later, I had cause to be at the Crushkin Lan in Spittle, and that's a long story. And a young lad named Cahill said, "You've got to come across the street with us," with myself and a friend, to Hughes's pub. And for like a half hour, no, we're not going across the street with you to Hughes's pub. It was easier just to go with the guy than, at that point. So we walked across Hughes's, and who's sitting at the bar with the guy that was on stage. And he ended up being one of the world-renowned box player. And he's got albums out and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out he lived down the road from me in Connemara. And I saw him and I said, I'm gonna know everything there is to know about this guy. And I was right. And so it was a push and pull because I didn't realize that everybody in the village at the time knew who I was, that I was a single American female living on her own in Connemara that took the bus to Galway every day. Everybody knew. I didn't know. Everybody knew. And so all of this wound up in the book. Why? Because it's in my journals. I was writing this down but I didn't want to make the book campy. I didn't want to patronize the Irish because I'm one of them in my own way, And so, that for me was about how to tell a story of the ambiguity of love, that push and pull, when there's veiled references, when you're trying to read somebody, you're trying not to give yourself away. And I've noticed that the Irish as a culture, as friendly as they are, they play their cards incredibly close to the vest.
Very secret.
That entire social mores They're the friendliest lot on earth. What they let you know about themselves, they're suspicious. If they're looking at you. They got their radar up. They're looking at you. That's who they are as a culture. So it's kind of both, and I find that fascinating as well. And so, yeah, that was what Dancing to an Irish Reel ended up being about. That push and pull of attraction when both people really want to connect. There's a culture clash going on. They're trying to read each other. Americans are direct. This is how I feel. This is how it looks. The Irish are not. And so, yeah, for me, that was the story I wanted to tell, set in that, soulful, panoramic, pastoral landscape with the graveyards and the culture and the ties to folklore and all of that. So yeah, I love all of that about Ireland because it's a feel. It's a sense. It's essentially a way of being in the world that I'm forever trying to articulate that. But aren't we all, right? Aren't we all?
Exactly. Now, Heidi, how did you choose what you focused on?
It was hard. Like you said, it's a very rich tapestry, Ireland. But the children I write about were not exposed to so much of that. And when they got a taste of it, it was like a first-time experience. I was fortunate enough to find 3 women here in the States that lived in that facility. One was in Rockland County. I live in New York. One was in Boston. And one was upstate. I got 3 of them to sleep over my house. I went and got them. They stayed at my house. And instead of interviewing them, I just fed them, took out the wine, and I sat there. And I listened to them reminisce. And at first, it was heartbreaking to hear. I mean, these children were institutionalized. But slowly, as the night went on, they had fond memories, and I tried to capture the feelings and little things like the aroma. Food was not plenty at that time. The feel of the clothing. They didn't have the nice soft wool. They had a hard linen that they wore. They were there during the worst blizzard ever recorded. I think it was 1947, and the cold, how they could feel it in their bones, and how they were so restricted because of this cold weather. I mean, they were within a small compound that was hidden behind the convent. So some of the people that actually lived in that town were not aware of this facility. And I found that out when I went to Ballinasloe to speak about it. I had a huge audience, and there were people that stood up and said, I didn't know. They were from a different generation, but there still was remnants of this. So I tried to focus on the feelings, and I tried to focus on the things that they would capture. The one girl that I do write about, my main character, does get to leave the facility on occasion, and I took her route. I took the train from Ballinasloe to Galway. I tried to view it as if it were the first time. I walked the walk they walked by the asylum just to get the feeling, to feel it. I went to the church and I sat in their confessional because that was such a big thing, going to confession. And then I went to visit the nuns. And the period I write about, there was 40 nuns in the convent. Now there's only 4 nuns left, and they're not in the convent anymore because it's a library. They live in a small house. So I did go to visit them, and it was interesting. There was only one of those 4 nuns actually worked in the primary school that serviced these children. And she was familiar with one of them that I was writing about. But it was interesting to get their perspective. And I tried to put that in the book. I tried to be fair. I read newspapers from that era. I tried to just be as fair as I could, to look at it from the mother's side, the children's perspective, the religious aspect, the, there was so much going on. I write about the 40s and the 50s. So I tried to capture, I think instead of being able to blend in the rich tapestry of Ireland, and I did get to put a little bit in there, I tried to focus on feelings, and I tried to focus on things from their perspective. My first draft was 3 times the size of my published book because I tried to capture everything.
Everything, yeah. Well, it's sometimes hard to put the whole tapestry in. Sometimes you just have to pull a few threads, and then, and I think the threads that you pulled and that you represented in the book are, it's amazing when you find those little details that even the people in the same town didn't know, and then you can bring that out into the light again. Whether it's good or bad, it's culturally part of who they are. It's part of their lives. It's part of their emotional journeys. And from that small town, and these women, this is clearly something that was truly important to them. And I love that they were willing to share that story through reminiscing over food and wine. I mean, isn't that such a universal thing?
The questions were so difficult to ask. Mm-hmm. And I said, let me just sit here and let them chat. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even write. And after they finally went to bed, I was like up all night writing down everything I could possibly remember. And there was one lady that I met with almost weekly. We went for lunch. She liked to have her wine. I would go pick her up. We'd go for lunch and sit and chat. And then after I dropped her off, I'd sit in my car and write everything down because I felt so grateful that they were confiding in me, that they were telling me their story. And they said I could share it, but they did not want to. One woman was married over 50 years and never told her husband that she was raised in a facility because she was an illegitimate child, and it had been drilled into her that was a shameful thing.
Mm-hmm. Heidi, do you think
to assure them that I would not reveal who they were, that I would write it as a novel. And slowly we built a trust. I mean, it took a couple of years to write this book and to get the stories. And then I had to pick and choose which ones to use because they all had their own little stories,
Heidi, I wanted to ask you about that. When the people that were in the facility, do you think when you're trying to be fair and you're trying to look at the religious aspect and the parents and the child, do you think they had any empathy for their parents or the sisters that took care of them, or did they have any of that perspective?
Well, it's very odd because they all had very different perspectives. There was a big redress, a lawsuit to compensate. I mean, hundreds of thousands of children were placed in these facilities over time, and they were sentenced through the courts. But it was very interesting to hear the different perspectives. Now, one of the women, she never knew who she was. She was picked up begging for alms. So they found her. She had no name, no date of birth. They gave that to her. She wouldn't say a bad word about any of the nuns. Then I tried to help them file for redress so that they could get some kind of compensation. And a different woman she could say nothing bad. And then there was another woman who just hated them. The sight of a nun hurled her. But most of them did have fond memories of some of the nuns. And I tried to show that. Some of them were very kind, and I mean, they're human beings like everybody else. And I tried to think about the fact that becoming a nun, do you go in there thinking I'm going to be in charge of 100 girls?
Right.
Most likely they are not the most maternal people.
So it's not the vocation that they chose.
I don't know if that's fair to say, but when I think of somebody maternal, it's a nun. I'm a Catholic school kid here. Sister Constance does not come to mind. So, I tried to look at it from their point of view too. They were given the task to feed and shelter these children, and that's what they did. So
They weren't necessarily given the task to nurture. They were given the task to shelter, keep alive, maybe religiously educate. But I mean, nurturing is something that you choose to do. And I guess the nuns, perhaps, maybe they didn't even have a choice with where they were placed. I mean, this might have been something that they didn't choose either.
Well, another thing to think about, I sat there because there was one nun in charge of, she was called the house mother, and she was in charge of this facility I write about only has 100 girls, which is not a big amount when you look at some of the schools. And I said, if I was in charge of 100 girls, someone's going to get hurt. And it's probably going to be me. But
that's what I was about to say.
Think about the task at hand, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there was one woman, I didn't talk to her, but they all spoke about her. She was raised in the facility, and when she was released, she came back. She couldn't handle the outside world, and she stayed there. She stayed there. She helped the house mother. So
the question is, you had someone who came and went. You took the train that she took. You took her journey back and forth.
Yes.
And then some were released. So how did that? I mean, maybe we're giving something away in the book, and we don't want to do that. So stop me if this question is going to tread on.
I'll answer it in a general way. A lot of the children were illegitimate. Some were destitute, and some were actually orphaned. Their parents died. Some of the children, a very small handful, maybe from the 100, maybe 10 to 15, were released over the summertime for a variety of reasons. Some of the older girls would be sent to take care of house for maybe the priest's mother or sister. That was her holiday. Some had actually did have parents that would take them for a week in the summer. There were a few children that were privileged with that summer holiday.
Did they, like in our foster system, our foster care system here in the States, eventually you age out of state care. Did they age out?
They aged out at 16. They were only given education until they called the 6th class. In my book, things change for some of the girls, and they do get to go to secondary school for a short time. But they're generally, they work in the laundry or in the school until they reach that age. They're sentenced through the court system, and there's actually a release date. I have the court documents. I love doing the research. I don't even like to write. I just want to do the research.
I know. As a historical fiction writer here, I'm going, I need to know all the facts. We may have gone way off the track of what anybody wanted to talk about here, but y'all watching the show, I'm sorry, I'm really interested in this.
Yeah, I love
They have a release date.
This is
depends on a situation. A situation is set up for them. Usually house care, child care, or cleaning house, and that's their situation. They're sent out.
What a fascinating and sad at the same time, but fascinating little bit of Irish history that no one would have really. I mean, for me, these are not stories I hear. And if the people in their own town didn't know that institution,
I am telling you, my jaw dropped when I was at this, and it was a jubilee, 50-year celebration for a nun, family nun that we knew. It wound up, she was a house mother. And I was sitting at a table with people I didn't even know, and the Irish love to chat, but they were talking about, I wish I had the book, it's called Fear of the Collar. It was a book that just came out, and it was about a boys' institution, and they had like 800 or 900 kids in their facility. And I just couldn't get over it. I read the book in 2 days. I couldn't even find it in Ballinasloe or Galway. I found it in Dublin. I mean, they really tried to hold this back during the time when I was over there. And when I came home, I was like, I have to find out about this.
Joyce has had several great questions, but Joyce, I want to put this question up here for you too, because this is something that I was thinking about. The ones that were orphaned, I mean, we look at foster care, we look at orphanages here, we look at these kinds of things here in the States. would they adopt these girls out if they didn't have family?
There wasn't really, first of all, adoption wasn't even legal in Ireland until I think like 1954. There is what people like babies, and there were, I guess you've heard about the tomb home that opens in my book, mother baby homes where the babies are born. There was a thing called Pan Am babies. There was an arrangement with Pan Am, and they would ship some of the babies over to America.
Same thing with Vietnam War orphans as
right.
well.
This is history repeating itself, and it does appear in many cultures. But these older children, there wasn't a formal adoption process, but the women did say sometimes somebody would disappear overnight, and you just never know what happened to her. Where'd Sheila go? Nobody knows. Nothing said. Sheila's gone. So I don't know if she was adopted, a family member came back to get her. God bless you. So I don't know the answer to that question. And the women that I spoke to and dealt with didn't believe or feel that there was any formal adoption.
This is absolutely fascinating. And I could keep talking about all of these little nuggets of Irish culture and history and all of these things. You guys have done such a wonderful job in your books of presenting layers of Irish culture and all of the different pieces that come together. And it is truly fascinating, especially if you take all of your books kind of as a whole and were to line them all up, what that tapestry of Ireland would look like. From Kevin's book, where he has got all of the different social strata. We've got the small town life with Claire from an outsider's perspective. We have this tiny little glimpse into an unseen world in Heidi's book. Joe, you've got this gorgeous marina and this port town that is just so charming. And Patricia, you've got so many different examples of Irish history and the strong women that were finding their way in those things. What great representation of Irish culture we have in all of these books. And, you know, as someone who has not personally experienced it, I am grateful for authors like you who bring all of those layers and all of those threads that form the tapestry together. For those of us who are interested in it, those of us that it is our clan, that we are being pulled back to by those invisible strings. And we get to experience it through your experiences in your writing. It is stunning. The country itself is stunning. And when you look at everything that comprises the Irish culture, Irish everything, it means so much to so many people who aren't even just genetically connected. There is something magical about that tiny place that pulls so many people in. And I think all of you in your own ways have encapsulated some bit of that magic. And we as readers are grateful to you for having done that. So I'm really excited about all of your books. And we will have, you know, anybody that's been looking at, I know in the comments you've been asking about the titles of the books. On this post, all of the authors' names are listed. If you can't find them in the comments somewhere, or going to their Facebook pages. I mean, absolutely go to their author websites and Facebook pages, or even just search them on Amazon, and you will find all of those books there, and all of them come highly recommended. So please, please, please. And of course, Kevin's book is available for pre-order right now on Amazon. But if you go there on St. Patrick's Day, then you can order it online.
You don't have a few days to wait, well, that's all.
That's right. I mean, and Annie did put the name she says in the comments here. So depending on where you're watching, I'm not sure where all they landed, but Annie has done a great job of filling that in for us as well, of getting all of that in there. So now comes my turn to tell a story. And I'm going to tell you a story. And I picked this story for our New Orleans History and Mystery segment, not because these people were necessarily Irish because I knew they were Irish, but it's because their names were very Irish to me. And I kind of figured it would not be a stretch for any of these people to be Irish and be in South Louisiana. As much as we think about the French in South Louisiana, there is actually a very large Irish and a very large Italian population down there. And so some of these names kind of just made me think that perhaps they were of Irish descent here. We're going to talk about the cottage plantation ruins. Would love to talk about the cottage plantation. However, it's no longer there, and I'm going to tell you why. So on what was once known as Moore's Point on River Road, which is just south of Baton Rouge, and River Road actually runs the length of the Mississippi between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So you could take the River Road between the two major cities along the Mississippi. The cottage plantation was built in 1825 by Abner Duncan. Sounds like an Irish guy, right? The area along the river became known as Duncan's Point. It still is today. A year after he completed the home, Abner gave the house and the property to his daughter, Frances, and her brand new husband, Frederick Conrad, as a wedding gift. And the Conrads turned it into a very profitable sugarcane plantation. They got to entertain a lot of very wealthy and notable people. But one of the most unusual guests that they had at the cottage was a man who came to the plantation one day seeking shelter and food for the night. The man's name was Abner Holt. He was charming and intelligent, and the Conrads just liked him so much that they didn't want to let him go, so he became Frederick's secretary. And so he helped kind of oversee the operations of the plantation. And it turned out, look at my typos, I was typing so fast on this one. I was telling the story. I wasn't even thinking about autocorrect. But Holt was a classical scholar and landscape designer. So this guy that basically came begging food and shelter for the night, as many travelers, especially travelers on foot, might do at a manor house, turns out he was actually very well educated. And so Holt remained loyal to the family and the plantation, serving them and taking care of things, even through the house being shelled during the Civil War, and both Conrad and Holt being captured and taken away. Now, Frederick Conrad, did not survive to see the end of the Civil War, but Holt did, and he returned to the cottage to find the family mostly dead or scattered. However, he stayed with what remaining staff and family there was, and he continued to take care of the house. The house had been stripped down of pretty much anything valuable, as it had been used as a yellow fever hospital during the war. The Union were the ones shelling the house, of course, and once they had taken the house, they then stripped it bare and used it for a hospital. Many soldiers died of everything from yellow fever to various injuries there at that house. And Holt continued staying on, even through all of that, now to his death in 1880. So over 50 years, Holt remained on the property. So of course, Holt is very connected to the property. So in 1960, and this is the reason why we call it the cottage plantation ruins, the house was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. Oh, no. And you can see these columns that are right here. This is actually a picture of the smoldering ruins. This picture was taken in 1960 of the house and, well, what was left of it, as the fire was finally just kind of smoldering itself out there. But if visitors slow along River Road to take a look at these ruins, some often see a tall, thin man with white hair wandering amongst the remaining columns and stepping over the crumbling piles of brick, holding a scrap of fabric in his hand. And this is because Holt was a bit of a hoarder in his time there. He loved to pick up things like string and fabric, scraps of fabric, even stale biscuits. And so he is often seen with one of those scraps of fabric as though it's something that he's picked up on the property and is kind of carrying around with him. But soon after being spotted, the man will vanish. So apparently, Holt still cares for the grounds to this very day. Now, Holt and the shelling during the Civil War, all of this is not the only thing that has happened at the cottage that lends itself to some hauntings there. So you would imagine, between being used as a yellow fever hospital and the many dying there, as well as Angus Holt, those mangled bodies are not necessarily the only ghosts there. And that is because in 1859, the luxurious Steamboat Princess, and this is actually a drawing of what the interior of the Steamboat Princess would have looked like. And the steamboat ran up the river from New Orleans, would make stops along the way upriver the Mississippi, and it could go as far north as, way up the Mississippi into Northern Territory, that it would drop people, and it was a very major means of transportation. So in 1859, the Princess exploded right in front of the cottage plantation there in the Mississippi River. Dozens were killed instantly, but many others were rescued from that burning wreckage in the river and taken to the grounds of the cottage plantation. Here, large white sheets were laid out and barrels of flour were opened and poured on the sheets. Burn victims then were rolled in the sheets and the flour to try to save them from their burns. And of course, many had their clothes completely burned off. And so we were looking at massive, massive burns to these people. So many of then those other passengers died, but we don't know exactly how many. There was no passenger manifest, and a lot of steamboats did not take on passenger manifests because they didn't necessarily know who was getting on and off at the various stops. But we don't know how many died in that cataclysmic explosion. All 4 boilers on the ship exploded at one time. It was found out later that it was due to not keeping the boiler pressure at a safe level. And so all 4 boilers on the ship blew up at one time. Estimates of the dead range from 70 to 200 passengers. The more common scholarly average is really more about 100, 150 passengers that died either instantly or from resulting injuries there on the front lawn of the cottage plantation. So nearly 150 years later, at night, clouds of white powder will rise from the ground as ghostly blood-stained white sheets are raised by the breeze off of the Mississippi River. And so the grounds of the cottage are some of the most haunted grounds along the river road. And so if you happen to be driving by and you see some ghostly specters of a home that was, then take a look around because the columns aren't the only specters standing there. You may see a few other things. So we always ask a lagniappe question, and tonight's lagniappe question for you guys, it's just a little something extra. That is what the word lagniappe means in South Louisiana. And so for you guys, are you a lucky leprechaun or do mischievous fairies ruin your good fortune? So do you have the luck of the Irish, or are you subject to the meddling fairies that might perhaps bring a bit of mischief your way? What do you think?
You know what's kind of depressing that I just found out? The Luck of the Irish was written by the British because the Irish have no luck. And if you have the luck of the Irish, it's not much luck at all.
Bad luck. We're going to take it and turn it on its head. We're going to make it work for us because isn't that what the Irish do?
Yes.
We're going to take something that might be bad to other people. We're going to make it work for us. So what do you think? Are you lucky? Are you lucky in any way? Or is this kind of or do the fairies get you? I'm more of the fairies get me. I think I'm constantly struggling with something that's making me feel like I'm pushing a stone uphill. What about you guys?
I feel I'm lucky every day because I'm Irish. So if you were born or if you're connected in any way, either through biology or through your heart, you're connected to Ireland, you're lucky.
If you're Irish, you're all related. Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Everyone's related somewhere.
Well, in this book, I have this kind of omnipresent narrator, Aunt Lucy, who kind of tells the family story throughout the chapters. And she is, at the beginning of the book, she's reminding her niece that through all the devastating things that have happened and all the careful decisions and the impulsive ones, you are lucky enough to be alive from all the decisions, the hundreds of millions of decisions your ancestors made for you to be here. So I think we're all lucky.
Yeah.
Strong survival.
Yeah,
Good
that's
point.
true. That's
Love
true.
it.
Maybe I need to reconsider my stone uphill because I maybe that's actually giving me strength and I should view it that way.
Yeah.
It's testing my mettle a little bit.
I definitely feel like the lucky one. I was born and raised in Southeast Georgia on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. And I never imagined in my wildest dreams I'd find myself where I am today. You know, it's just been one series. Yeah, there's been some bad luck here and there, but bad luck gets overcome by good luck.
You don't recognize the good luck without the bad luck.
That's right.
Excellent point.
That's right. You got to hurt to know what feeling good is. And,
Excellent point.
and I feel very lucky. I mean, from the publication, the writing of this book, and all the nice people that I met through the Pat Conroy Literary Center and the Pat Conroy Literary festival. I want to give a shout out to all those wonderful people that helped me along the way. They're good people, and the publication and the success I've had with it. I've had a couple of horrendous health scares in the last few weeks. They stuck me in a neuro-intensive care unit for 3 days trying to figure out what was wrong in my head. And I told them what's wrong in my head is I'm just a crazy Irishman. The nurse said, how can you be so cheerful? And I said, because I don't know any better. But yes, I absolutely feel lucky. And sometimes I get the banshee on the shoulder that screams in my ear, but
Okay, Claire, what do you think? Claire, I think you're a lucky person. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
What a sweet thing to say. I think life is going to be life is going to be life. I think nowhere is it written that any of this is ever going to be easy. So I think it all comes down, therefore, to, pick your attitude, pick your consciousness, because that's going to dictate the experience. And so, I know this is about luck, and I certainly know, what you're talking about. I would say by and large, it becomes a question of do you acknowledge luck when it's on your table? Do you take advantage of the opportunities when they're there? Because that's a large part of it too, But yeah, I think that there is something to be said for the idea of luck and timing, and we have all had those uncanny alignments.
Yeah.
When you just think, what? What? This is uncanny. So I like the idea of that. And I think as a personality, I keep my eyes wide open. And I pray. I'm a person of faith and hope and magic.
Yes.
I love it.
Magic.
Magic.
And that's an Irish thing, that faith and magic, they walk hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That sense in the mystical is the sense of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it because of the terrain. It's the environment of that island.
Mm-hmm.
It is abundance. It's verdant beauty.
Yes.
And my idea was heaven was walking the bog.
Yeah.
I walked the bog aimlessly, pretty much, if not every day, close to it. I just walked because that's how you get the feel of a place,
Mm-hmm.
And
Put your hands in the dirt.
huh?
Put your hands in the dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about the soul of the land that you can really attune to it on foot if you don't have a plan. And when you walk, that sort of stream of consciousness you get into, and if you just pay attention to the mind, what's rattling around in your mind, and it's a very, for someone like me that has always walked, I just walk out the door. I
enjoyed reading your book and your walks in Spittle on the.
Yeah, that's a sweet thing. And I
had read that shortly.
I have your book on Kindle. It seems to me.
Oh, good. Then read it.
I will. And I will. And you're lovely. And so are you, Patricia. Joe, I love you. And my new friend.
You don't have your last name up there.
I don't have Fullerton up there.
Oh, Patricia doesn't.
Oh, Patricia, sweetie, what's your last name?
Falvey, Falvey.
Okay, I'm already now.
Yeah, it's on the broadcast.
Yeah, now I remember. Yeah,
it's on the broadcast. Well, speaking of feeling the feel of a place, y'all know how I feel about New Orleans, and for very much the same reasons, because magic, spirituality, and mystery and history walk hand in hand there. And so, because I get this one chance to talk about my own work here a little bit, reminding everybody that Crescent City Moon and Crescent City Sin is my series, and the first 2 books are available on Amazon. So I always like to say, go check out the reviews and leave your reviews on Amazon. But if you can, please support your local independent bookstores by ordering online. They are available online at most of those independent bookstores, and we know how desperately they can use our help these days. So please check that out. And in that vein, we're going to check out the trailer to Crescent City Moon.
Love the self-support.
That's
Thank you.
incredible.
That's great.
Thanks so much. I love the horns in that music. One of the things I love so much about making the trailers is the music. And I realize on Facebook, most people are scrolling by with no sound. But for me, I love the music. It just does so much for it. And the horns in that one are just like, it's a little chilling there. It's so much fun. Well, speaking of my books, here's some other books by these folks. And guys, these are, of course, not all of them. But, you know, we've got Kevin's new book right here over here. It's coming out. Of course, I have the Linen Queen here, who's one of the many that we talked about. Patricia does have several set in Ireland. This is Claire's that is set in Ireland as well. But of course, Claire's got wonderful books that are set in the Deep South as well. Make sure you check out all of those. So guys, again, please leave those reviews. Do what you can on Amazon. But again, support those local bookshops as well. Now, Annie and I have got some fun guests, including a few of you here, that are joining us for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. We are rolling a parade virtually through a whole bunch of wonderful book clubs here on Facebook. And we have got events starting in the very early morning all the way through the evening. Annie and I and Heidi is going to be there along with Robert Gwaltney. We are going to have Irish tea and trivia to start our day early on. And then Annie and I will be wrapping up the day after we have lots of great panels and interviews about all things Ireland and this writing and wonderful things all day long, including author Laura Kemp and her Irish band for an Irish Keeley. We're going to have some music, y'all. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to wrap it all up with some truly hilarious guys at the pub that we will talk a bit more. You have to join us at the pub to understand what the name is, why the name is significant, and all of the laughs that we're going to have to wrap things up for the end of our virtual Irish St. Patrick's Day Parade. It is going to be an absolute blast. So please, Annie and I hope that you will join us for any and all of it that you can. Keep an eye on my page on the Write Review and various places and those book clubs that are participating will all have wonderful information for you about how you can join in. And Annie posted today with all of the links so that you can join those book clubs and be part of all the fun all day long on Sunday, the 14th. So this coming Sunday, you don't want to miss a beat. It is going to be such fun. And if you did not get a chance to watch this episode from the very beginning, or if you want to check out some past episodes of the Second Mind Show, and we have been broadcasting since this summer. So we are now on episode 24 with lots of specials thrown in there. So if you want to go check any of those out, please go on over to YouTube. All of the episodes live on Nola Nash Entertainment YouTube channel so that you can check those out and keep in touch with any of those authors that you find there. We've got some great folks who have joined us over the course of our time since, well, basically quarantine began, and Annie and I wanted to do something truly fun. And so we get the joy of putting this together. Annie does a great job rounding up all of those guests for us and putting together some great panels. And I have the honor of talking to them on Wednesday nights. So truly the best part of my week. So thank you guys so much for spending your evening with me tonight. I know for some of you it's getting very late, so we're going to wrap things up for you. But thank you so very much for joining us. It has truly been a pleasure. And what a great and wonderful way to get ready for a fantastic Irish holiday with St. Patrick's Day coming up. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you here on Facebook on Sunday for our St. Patrick's Day Parade. So thank you guys so much for spending some time with us.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. What a great
Thank
time.
you. Have a great night, y'all.
See you Sunday.